Worship the Blade. Chapter 2. A Blade Against the Neck. The air in the private VIP lounge of the Velvet Crown was thick enough to taste. A suffocating mix of sweet plum tobacco, expensive bourbon, and the faint, underlying iron tang of blood from the alley 3 nights prior. Elena stood in the shadowed alcove at the top of the grand velvet staircase, her tactical boots replaced by sleek, silent, rubber-soled shoes. Her heavy service coat stripped away to reveal a fitted dark turtleneck and dark denim. Her dark hair was pinned up tight and immaculate, keeping every strand off her neck. Her skin burned where his mouth had touched her 3 nights ago. No amount of scalding water in her apartment shower had been able to wash away the phantom heat of his lips. Below her, the lounge hummed with low jazz and the clinking of crystal glasses. The city's elite moved through the red amber light, completely oblivious to the fact that every square foot of the floor beneath them was owned by a monster. And there he was. Julian sat in a high-backed leather booth at the far end of the private mezzanine. He wore a crisp, dark-collared shirt, the top 2 buttons left undone, revealing the hard, muscular line of his collarbone. His heavy coat was draped over the back of the leather seat. In his right hand, he idly swirled a glass of amber liquid, the ice clinking softly against the crystal. He looked bored, disinterested in the world around him. Elena pulled a slim, razor-sharp steel blade from the hidden sheath tucked into the small of her back. The metal was cold against her palm, comforting in its absolute lethality. She didn't want to arrest him tonight. She wanted to prove to him and to herself that he was human, that he could bleed, that his terrifying obsession with her was a fatal flaw she could exploit. She moved like a shadow, slipping through the heavy velvet curtains behind his booth. The music drowned out her faint footsteps. The guards posted at the archway had been silently lured away moments before by a false radio call she'd routed through the precinct frequency. She had 60 seconds. Elena stepped out from behind the curtain, her movement fluid, precise, and silent. Before he could even turn his head, her left arm snapped forward, wrapping tightly across his broad chest to pin him against the leather seat. In the same breath, her right hand brought the razor edge of the steel blade flush against his throat, pressing just hard enough to indent the warm, smooth skin right over his pulsing carotid artery. "Don't move," Elena hissed, leaning down until her mouth was inches from his ear. Her voice was ice, sharp and trembling with cold adrenaline. "One twitch, Julian, and I sever your throat before you can take another breath." Julian didn't flinch. He didn't tense his broad shoulders. He didn't even drop his glass of bourbon. Instead, he let out a low, smooth exhale, the sound almost a sigh of absolute relief. Slowly, deliberately, he set his crystal glass down on the mahogany table with a soft clink. "You smell like rain and cold iron, my little fairy," he murmured. His voice rolled low and warm against her face. "I was beginning to think you weren't coming." "Shut up!" she snapped, pressing the steel blade a fraction of a millimeter deeper. A tiny, microscopic bead of crimson blood bloomed against the silver edge of her knife. "You think this is a game? You touched me at my crime scene. You put your hands on a police officer. Give me one reason why I shouldn't slide this steel through your neck right now." Julian didn't look at the blade. He slowly tilted his head back into her hold, resting his heavy, broad shoulders completely against her restraining arm. offering his exposed throat to her weapon without a single trace of fear. Then his long, heavy hand reached up. He didn't grab her wrist to disarm her. Instead, his bare, warm fingers wrapped gently around her waist, his thumb hooking into the belt loop of her denim, dragging her inch by agonizing inch over the back of the leather booth until her body was pressed flush against his side. The heat radiating off him was blinding, a furnace in the dim red room. "Do it, my little fairy," Julian breathed, his dark eyes rolling up to lock onto hers with an intensity so raw, so completely unhinged, it made her breath catch violently in her lungs. "Press harder. Slice the skin. If I die by your hand, I'll die the happiest man in this miserable city." Elena's heart slammed violently against her ribs. Her fingers trembled around the hilt of the blade. "You're insane." "I am consumed," he corrected softly, his voice dropping into a dangerous, starving whisper. Before she could react, his grip on her waist tightened like an iron vise. In one fluid, terrifying burst of speed, he twisted her body, disarming her wrist with a flick of his fingers while slamming the blade flat onto the mahogany table. In the same second, he yanked her over the leather seat and down into his lap, trapping her against his chest. Elena gasped, her hand slamming against his broad shoulders to push away. But Julian wrapped his arm around her back like an iron band, holding her so tight she could feel every heavy, steady beat of his heart. He tilted her chin up with his thumb and forefinger, his dark eyes pitch black, wild, and utterly feverish as he looked down at her face. "You brought a knife to kill me," he rasped, his face hovering a fraction of an inch from hers, his breath hot, heavy, and smelling of dark bourbon. "And all I can think about is how breathtaking you look when you're trying to take my life. Let me go," she breathed, her sharp eyes glaring into his, refusing to show the terrifying flutter in her chest. "Never," Julian whispered, and crushed his mouth down onto hers. This kiss was even more desperate than the last. He drank from her like a dying man, his tongue forcing its way past her lips, claiming her mouth with an agonizing, starving possessiveness that made her head spin. His hand slid up from her waist, sliding into the back of her hair, pulling her head back to deepen the kiss until she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't remember the badge pinned to her coat or the law she swore to uphold. Elena fought him, her fists pounding against his hard chest. But as his tongue tangled with hers and his thumb stroked the sensitive skin beneath her jaw, a dark, terrifying warmth surged through her veins. Her knuckles involuntarily clenched into the fabric of his dark shirt, holding onto him as the world dissolved into red light, heavy bourbon, and his suffocating, dangerous touch. When he finally broke the kiss, his lips lingered against her bruised, wet mouth, both of them breathing hard, their hot gasps filling the quiet alcove. "Kill me right after, baby," Julian rasped, his dark eyes burning into her very soul as his thumb brushed over her swollen lower lip. "Because as long as I have breath in my lungs, every time you come near me, I am going to devour you."